2024 presidential candidates filed their financial reports from the past few months over the weekend, and the numbers show how much candidates are raising and spending and offer one view into how the GOP race is evolving. CBS News chief elections and campaign correspondent Robert Costa has more.
Hello, South Carolina.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis hit the trail today amid a campaign shakeup, laying off about 10 staff members as he struggles to gain traction in the crowded GOP field. DeSantis made the moves after burning through cash faster than most of his opponents in the second quarter, spending about 40% of what he's raised.
So I think we've got a lot of work to do over these next 18 months.
CBS News has learned that some key donors are growing frustrated with the campaign and its leadership and are alarmed about the lack of voter enthusiasm for DeSantis. They fear Trump is in a far better primary position.
The more I'm out there, the more support we get in these early states.
DeSantis' standing against the former president has plummeted in recent months.
We are totally dominating DeSantis.
Allies say a bright spot for the campaign is Casey DeSantis.
We want you to be on board to help take this country back.
Sources say the governor's donors feel she could spur a turnaround for the campaign. There are concerns emerging across the aisle, too. Democrat Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is challenging President Biden, has been making incremental gains in the polls. He's now speaking out on comments that prompted charges of racism and anti-Semitism, after falsely suggesting that COVID-19 was engineered to spare Jewish and Chinese people.
There's an argument that it is ethnically targeted. COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and black people.
And Robert Costa joins me now. Bob, you mentioned several of the specific numbers in your piece, these financial numbers, but is there something more broadly we can draw from what these numbers tell us about the state of the presidential race at this point?
It means that everybody right now in this Republican presidential race, John, they're going to have to tighten the belt a bit, start to ration some of their resources financially because they're in for a long haul. Former President Trump continues to maintain much of his hold over the Republican Party's core voters, his longtime coalition. And for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, this is really a summer reckoning. We've seen this in history before. I know you've reported on many of these past campaigns. I think of John McCain in 2008 when he almost seemed down and out, and he had to slim down his campaign to try to catch up, focus on some of the early voting states. For him, it was New Hampshire. And for DeSantis, it might be Iowa as much as anywhere else to make sure that he can get that bounce in the first contest.
That's right. In the McCain campaign, he was left to carrying his own bags before he came back. Do the fundraising numbers tell us anything about who will or won't be participating in the Republican debates?
It's interesting and intriguing that Chris Christie, the former New Jersey governor, he's in. But I do wonder, looking at these numbers, whether former Vice President Mike Pence will be able to make it on the debate stage. He had underwhelming fundraising numbers. That doesn't mean he's out of it in terms of making that debate stage in August, but it could be quite difficult in the coming weeks to generate the kind of momentum he needs. We'll see what he does with his aligned or allied groups, as they call them, the C4s, the PACs, to see if he can meet that threshold. It'd be quite a statement on the state of the party if the former vice president can't make the stage, but for now it's TBD.
And the former president said over the weekend, former President Trump said he's undecided on whether he's going to participate in the debates, saying when you have a big lead, you don't do it. Strategically, when you talk to people, is there anybody who says that's a bad idea or if he were to skip the debates?
Around Trump, there's really a chorus that's singing him that advice every day: stay away from the debates. They don't want to see him become a political target. Though for Trump, if he's not on stage, he will certainly be a topic. I know if I was moderating that debate come August, we'd ask a lot about the front runner because he is the front runner. So he'll be a topic of debate. And having covered Trump for about a decade, there's nothing he detests more than not having a chance to punch back, as he would put it, when people punch up at him or punch down. And so he's not going to have that opportunity if he doesn't show up, except other than appearing on Truth Social. So closer to the date, Trump is someone who changes his mind, could make a last-minute decision to be there. But for now, he's listening to the advice of his advisors and leaning toward staying behind.
In the 2 months since Florida Governor DeSantis got in the race, Bob, just using that as a kind of rough figuring measure, has the theory changed about how Donald Trump loses the primary? Has it changed, or has it just not kicked in? And has that theory become more or less plausible in the months since former President Trump has been taking attacks in one form or another from a variety of candidates?
When DeSantis got in, it was part of around the time of his book launch, and he was really starting to attack Trump from the right, critiquing Trump on his position with regard to COVID-19 policy, saying that Trump's relationship and rapport at times with Dr. Anthony Fauci and other health officials was something that DeSantis found to be a political target. The way the mandates were handled in different states and Trump's interactions with certain governors, there was a soft spot from some DeSantis allies perceived around Trump on those issues, and others like former VP Pence came against Trump on abortion, say he hasn't done enough to really be in solidarity with the right wing of the party on that front. But we've seen that these right-wing attacks from Trump, saying Trump's not conservative enough, they just haven't landed. So now there's a hope maybe he implodes with the weight of indictments, one possibly ahead in Atlanta, Georgia, Fulton County, another possibly ahead in the January 6th federal case. But implosion, that's a tough bet in politics, especially with someone who has shown that Teflon quality, politically speaking, for so long.
Robert Costa in Washington. Thanks a lot, Bob.
Thank you, John.